You find the tree first. Low branches heavy with fruit ripe enough that the smell alone should draw the whole group. You don't call out. Instead, you walk back toward camp at your normal pace, doing nothing unusual, and you mention casually that you didn't find much worth going back for. Tomorrow alone, you'll return to that tree. No one taught you to do this. There is no word yet for what you just did, and it may be older than words themselves. This is roughly 100,000 years ago, give or take long before writing, long before most of what we'd recognize as complex language. And what you just pulled off, that quiet, deliberate misdirection, required something remarkable happening inside your skull. Here's the question worth sitting with. Lying feels like a moral failure, something bolted onto human nature as a flaw. But what if it's closer to the opposite? What if deception isn't a corruption of intelligence? What if it's one of the reasons intelligence evolved in the first place? The answer starts somewhere you wouldn't expect, not with humans at all, but with the animals we share our intelligence with. Primatologists Richard Byrne and Andrew Whiten at the University of St. Andrews spent years in the 1980s and 90s cataloging something startling in wild primates, documented instances of what they called tactical deception. One animal deliberately manipulating another's understanding of a situation for its own benefit. A young baboon spotting an adult female uncovering a buried food source would suddenly scream as if attacked, drawing the dominant male's attention away and scattering the group, then quietly circle back once the commotion cleared to claim the food itself. Chimpanzees observed hiding facial expressions of excitement upon finding food, specifically when a higher-ranking group member was nearby watching. Byrne and Whiten didn't just catalog anecdotes. They found something more revealing when they mapped this behavior across primate species by brain size. The frequency of observed tactical deception tracked closely with relative brain size, especially in regions tied to social processing. The better connected, more socially complex the species, the more sophisticated its deception. This became known as the Machiavellian intelligence hypothesis, the theory that primate intelligence, including eventually ours, evolved substantially to navigate social manipulation. Not just to outsmart predators or solve puzzles, to outthink each other. Sit with that. The same cognitive horsepower that lets you plan, empathize, and cooperate may have been built in significant part by the arms race of figuring out who was lying to whom. That's the first piece. The second piece explains why deception isn't something any young child can simply do on command, because it turns out to require a very specific piece of cognitive machinery to click into place first. To successfully deceive someone, you can't just withhold information. You have to model accurately what's currently inside another creature's head, and then act to plant something false there instead. Psychologists call this capacity theory of mind, the ability to understand that other minds hold beliefs that can be different from your own, and different from reality itself. Researchers studying child development, including work associated with the Max Planck Institute's studies on early cognition, have repeatedly found the same pattern. Children reliably fail at convincing deception before roughly age 3 or 4, precisely because they haven't yet developed a working theory of mind. A toddler hiding a broken vase will often still believe you can't see what they're obviously holding, because they haven't yet grasped that your knowledge and theirs can diverge. Once that cognitive switch flips, lying ability appears almost immediately afterward, not as a separate skill learned later, but as something that becomes possible the instant a child can model another mind accurately enough to manipulate it. There's a further wrinkle in this research worth knowing. The same studies found something almost paradoxical. Children who develop theory of mind earlier and who become capable liars sooner also tend to show stronger early social and cooperative skills overall, better at sharing, better at reading a playmate's mood, better at working together toward a shared goal. The capacity for deception and the capacity for genuine cooperation weren't competing traits arriving on separate tracks. They arrived together as two expressions of the exact same underlying cognitive leap. Think about what that means for the moment back at that fruit tree. Walking back to camp with a carefully neutral expression wasn't a simple trick. It required tracking in real time what your group currently believed and calculating exactly what false version of events would leave that belief intact until you could act on the gap. If catching cheaters from an earlier point in this channel's story required a specialized detection system, deception required the opposite, a specialized construction system building a false but plausible reality inside someone else's mind and holding it there under scrutiny. You've probably assumed if you've ever felt a flash of guilt over a small daily lie that this reveals something uniquely broken about you or maybe about modern life specifically. Too much pressure, too many white lies required just to get through a day smoothly. That assumption misses just how old and how universal this behavior actually is. Psychologist Bella DePaulo, then at the University of Virginia, ran a landmark 1996 study asking participants to keep detailed diaries of every lie they told over the course of a week, no matter how small. Her findings, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, were striking in their consistency. The average person told roughly 1 to 2 lies per day. Not occasional liars caught in dramatic betrayals. Ordinary participants in ordinary conversations, threading small deceptions through daily life at a steady, almost unremarkable rate. Most of these weren't cruel or self-serving in any dramatic sense. Many were small social lubricants. A compliment slightly inflated, an excuse slightly softened. Precisely the kind of low-stakes tactical deception Byrne and Whiten had documented in Baboons circling back to a food cache. DePaulo's diary study found something else worth noting. Participants themselves rarely felt much guilt over these small daily lies and rarely thought much about them again once told. The lies that produced lasting guilt and rumination were a small minority, the ones involving real stakes, real trust, real potential harm if discovered. The everyday background hum of small deception, by contrast, barely registered as morally significant to the very people telling it, suggesting it operates less like conscious dishonesty and more like a well-practiced social reflex. Here's the twist that reframes the whole question this video opened with. Deception was never a late addition to human nature, some flaw introduced by civilization, language, or moral failure. It's older than language, older likely than modern humans themselves. It emerged directly alongside the social intelligence that makes us who we are. The same theory of mind machinery that lets you love someone deeply read a room or comfort a friend is the exact same machinery that lets you mislead one. You don't get one without the capacity for the other. They're not opposites. They're the same tool, pointed in different directions. Think about your own last small unremarkable lie, not a betrayal, just an ordinary social smoothing over. Notice how automatic it felt, how little deliberate effort it took to track what the other person believed and adjust your words to manage it. That ease isn't a moral shortcut. It's a cognitive skill so old and so foundational that your brain doesn't experience it as skill at all anymore. It experiences it as simply talking to another person. None of this is an argument that all deception is harmless or that betrayal and small social lies belong in the same category. DePaulo's own later research is clear that the lies people regret most and that damage relationships most severely are the rarer, higher-stakes ones involving real breaches of trust, not the constant background hum of small social lubrication. The point was never that lying doesn't matter, that the capacity for it was never a late corruption bolted onto an honest species. It was present at the foundation, doing exactly the same job your empathy does, just aimed the other way. Back at that fruit tree walking toward camp with a carefully blank expression, you weren't inventing something shameful and new. You were running some of the oldest, most sophisticated software your species would ever develop, built in the same evolutionary workshop as everything else that makes you capable of understanding another mind at all. Tomorrow, when you walked back to that tree alone, nobody in camp would ever know exactly how the fruit found its way into your hands. That gap between what they believed and what was actually true was never a flaw in the system. It was the system working exactly as it was built to.